I'm Aaron Campbell, Director of Product at A2 Hosting, a world host brand. I'm speaking tonight about kind of a practical look at building a product. I've been working in the web space for about 20 something years and WordPress for about 18 and building products in that space for about 10 of that. And I'm looking forward to sharing some practical tips. Okay, so first of all, thank you for the amazing introduction. You all have a particularly fantastic meetup here, by the way. I don't know if you all realize just how spoiled you are with all of this stuff, but I've been to a lot of these meetups. They are not all this smooth. So I've been in the web space for a long time, well over 20 years building stuff on the internet. Building products in that space for a little over 10 years now. Definitely tied in pretty tightly to the WordPress space. So some of the early products that I worked on, things like iTheme security, some of you might know, and then over to GoDaddy to work on products and on through Newfold and ultimately to A2 hosting. And I think that there's a few things that are happening. Well, first of all, before we get too far in, who here like builds or works on a product, would you say? Builds, works on, or markets a product. Okay. So we got, I don't know, a quarter. And then who's doing more like services? Okay. So in all that time in web hosting, I would have said that we were solidly a service. And we're just not quite that anymore. The web hosting space has changed a lot. We've seen players like Shopify come in and completely change people's expectation of what it means to like get online. It's no longer, I want to get hosting. I'm going to install this on it. I'm going to do this thing. Hosts just aren't so much just a server in a data center somewhere. And so as part of that, I've had a really great time over the last while building products to help these hosts offer full solutions in the way that people have come to expect. And so I want to talk about the process, not any one specific product that I've built, but the process of building a great product. And this is what we're all striving for, right? Successful product. But what does that mean to you all? This is where we get some of you talking. Yeah, what does this mean? You use it or other people use it? You have users. Yeah, absolutely. Happy users, right? We want them to like it. Huh? Paying users. Did someone say paying users? I do think that often profit, right? But not always. A lot of times inside hosts, we're building products that are meant to fill a gap or meant to just keep users happy or around. And that product isn't meant to make anything. So it's not always profit, but it often is. Like it like solves a problem or fixes a thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that the reason that I wanted to bring this up first is that there are a lot of different ways to define a successful product, and not all products are going to be built quite the same way. And so this is my beginning caveat that you have to start the whole process by thinking about what it is that you're trying to build and what your success metric is going to be. And if that's paying users, you're going to be developing in one specific way. If it's just solving a problem, or if it's just having users or filling a gap in the rest of your offerings, you're going to build slightly different. But I do think that there are significant a significant amount of shared steps, shared processes, and similar team structures and such for all of these that we can look at. Some that I think that I also put in my notes and I'm seeing I think that a big thing, somebody said users and happy users. And I think a big part of that comes from like ease of use, like how simple your product is. A lot of times that is a success metric as well. So how do we get there? I think that I come from a very technical background. Before I got into product, I was a developer for like a decade before I started building products. And so when I first started into product, I would have started by building out the functionality, right? I know what I want this thing to do. It's time to start making it do that, because every product needs to be functional in some way or another. That's not where we want to start. I did discover along the way just how important design is, which is something that can be very hard for a super technical person to finally grasp and admit. And so amazing designs, still not the right spot to start though. I think that the most important, like once you've figured out where you're trying to go, the most important thing to do is to start with what you want your customers, your users to experience. What is it that you're trying to create, not in the functionality, not in the look, but like what do you want your customers to see and experience when they're there? So if you're trying to, something that I had been building very recently, control panel for managing all of your sites on A2, we had a very specific vision, not for the specific functionalities in it, but that it would be a place where users could go and just do everything that they needed to take care of their website to make sure that it was healthy and secure and doing the things that they want it to do all in one place. And we started there and built out this experience. Here's what we want them to see and experience and how we want them to be able to use it. And then we started working backwards from there. It's a little counterintuitive, the way that I think that really great products are built. You look at this pyramid, you would obviously build this from the bottom up, clearly. And in product, that really is starting with functionality, right? What it's doing, because you build out the code, the databases, the structures, all of that, and sitting on top of that somewhere is your design, and sitting on top of that somewhere is your interface and your flows, the way that you get from one place to another, and ultimately the experience. But in this case, a customer, a user, is really experiencing this part up in the yellow. That's what we care about most, because that's what they care about. If they're going to have a good experience, if they're going to enjoy it, if they're going to be willing to pay for it, it's all going to matter how they're experiencing it. Who has been frustrated with a product that is actually very functional, but not a great experience? Literally almost every hand, right? It's easy to say, well, it does what it needs to do, but we really have to flip this on its head and go the other direction. Now, you may build from the bottom up, but you have to plan from the top down. Always, 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 you have to plan from the top down. Imagine, if you will, with this pyramid that, we discover that the user's experience actually needs to have a broader base or one straight side that's perfectly vertical. This pyramid no longer supports that. So when you look at this pyramid, that's easy to build, but that's only because it's already planned out for you. Once you figure out what that top section needs to look like and do, then we can define everything else. Of those people that said you work on like products, how many of you is it like just you building a product and you're all things? Got a few here. And how many of you have, like, let's say a small team, less than 5 people? Okay. And do any of you have bigger teams than 5 people working on? Yeah, okay. Pantheon, yes. Or DreamHost over here, yes, for sure. So yeah, so it doesn't matter necessarily how many people you have. There is a bit of a division of labor for assigning all the tasks, the jobs that are necessary in building a great product. And I want to look at those and talk a little bit about them and how to figure out how to bring that together, whether that's just realizing that you need to think about and understand all these things, or whether that's realizing that you need to identify the people that can do it. Because the only way to build this kind of product that's just truly smooth and functional is to have the right team and to bring them in at the right time. You don't necessarily need everybody up front when you're first conceptualizing and planning a product, but you do need ultimately to have this whole group. User researcher. All right. So we don't start by building, but we do start by figuring out what people need. I was talking to someone just a little bit ago about the web hosting industry and how that whole thing has changed to be much more sort of solution driven, product driven. And a lot of this is getting to know, like a lot of succeeding at this, the hosts that are making this change from services to products really well are out there talking to their users. They are finding out what it is that people actually need and how they can make their customers' lives better. Just ask, how could we make your life better? And just listen to what they say to start planning it out. But a user researcher is important. And if that's you, great. But if it's not, that's where you really need to start. Next one to come in is quality control. Before you start building anything, you have to decide who's going to be the final say on whether a thing is good enough, especially if you're going to be working with a larger team. This is essentially who is the Steve Jobs, right? Who is the person who we're going to build a thing and we're going to hand it to them and they're going to go, I don't like the way this feels. The edges are too rough. Fix it. Or this is good enough. Ship it. And if you don't have that single point of control, it will be very easy for your project to slide off the rails. And so quality control is the next thing that I bring in immediately. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how I actually formed this out internally in some recent teams. But first we'll go through the different roles. UX designer and UI designer. I actually threw these together on here because I feel like everybody sees these as the same. Who's confident that they know the difference between a UX designer and a UI designer? Yeah, we got a few tentative hands. I do think that there are some differences. Anybody want to throw out some of the differences that you see in the two roles? So UX focuses more on how people feel, and UI more on like what they see and do. That's definitely pretty close along the way. That's interesting. So you said that UX is more emotional and UI is more technical or functional, as you put it. They definitely have a division of roles here. I put up kind of, oh, this is a slightly older version. But so UX on the left and UI on the right. And this is, not everybody agrees with Aaron. That's okay. But this is how I see the difference between these roles. And the left side, a big part of what they care about as the UX designer is how a customer um, experiences the product, what they're feeling. Yes, like that kind of emotional side of it, but they completely care about the people that are using the product. They don't care if it is 10 times as hard to build it the way that people want it to be. All they care about is kind of advocating for the people. And so a lot of that comes in yes, the user research, but also in things like wireframes and prototypes, very early stages where it's all about, is this going to be easy for a person to use? Is this going to be a joy to use? Is this going to make our customers rate us a 10 out of 10, right? Like, that's all they care about. And on the other side, for UI design, that's as you start to actually get into implementation. That's design. That's everything from graphical design to how the layouts, the typography. This is when you start bringing in your branding, these kinds of things. That is all the UI designer. Oh, again, old slide. Sorry. Okay. So the next one up is project manager. Once you start having all these different roles and tasks, if you're going to be more than just yourself, if your team reaches even a relatively small size, let's say a 4 or 5 person team, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a person whose task is just to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and that all the plates that are supposed to be spinning are still spinning. It's very hard for any one person on this team to do their job and think about everybody else doing their jobs. So this is a thing that I definitely implemented and brought into A2 as we first started developing products. We had never had this concept of a project manager, or they had never had this concept of a project manager. And when we finally brought them in, because that took some convincing, right? That's not cheap to bring more people in. We saw significant increase in development velocity, which probably doesn't surprise you, but it's an easy spot to try to cut corners. And I just can't stress enough how bad it is to cut this particular corner. I think that I think that's a brilliant point. So what he was saying, just to make sure that he hits the recording and stuff as well, is that even on a team that I may have said is kind of like too small to really need a project manager, someone owning the project manager role is very useful because it also includes things, to your point, like documenting what's going on, making sure that if we build another product, that we have these steps figured out, or when it comes time to do the next iteration of this project, we remember why we did things the way that we did them. And so, yes, I agree. This is an extremely important part of the team. And then lastly, the thing that used to come first to my mind, the developers, the engineers, the people that are actually going to be building the functionality, because a lot of that is building functionality to support a specific experience, to support these user flows that we have decided are the best way to deliver the experience to our user, to implement a design that's definitely going to work for our users. This is how I had it divided up in my most recent product development team. User researcher and UX designer, these were actually one person on my team. She was fantastic at it. She was really great at getting user research done, which, by the way, user research isn't just speaking to people. It's not just talking to clients or customers or even potential customers. It's taking all that information and distilling it into something that's useful to build a product. That is probably the hardest thing that a user researcher does. It's very I mean, we all just had a 30 minutes to sit and talk to other people, but distilling down whatever it was that you talked about into something that a team can actually take action on and build, that's a much more unique skill. But she had that. She filled both those spots. Quality control, I took that role. I was the Steve Jobs stamp of approval, or not, I guess. UI designer, we actually broke this one into two different roles, because we had one person that handled more of the graphics and the branding, and we had one person that did a lot more of the implementation of those into actual layouts and buttons and whatnot. And so that was actually two different people. We had a project manager that was just a project manager. That was not me. And then we had a whole team of developers and engineers. We had about, I guess, 8 developers, and then we have engineering teams at the host that, I mean, we're a web host. We have significant engineering teams, but we would just pull them in as needed for this project. I'm curious, before we move on to anything else, for those of you that have been doing some product development, and especially those of you with teams, do you see anything that's missing? Things, other things that the group might benefit from? I'm not the only smart person here, right? So I would love if anybody has anything else to bring up, anything they think I missed before we move on. Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, so this is a great point, and something that I probably should have brought up at the beginning. She said that I didn't have anything here about like the stakeholders or how communication happened around that. In this particular instance, that was my job to make sure that as I was defining and building out this product, that I had the stakeholder buy-in that was necessary. Um, I kept this talk focused as much as I could on the actual action of building a product. There are definitely tangential things that are tied into that. Things like communications with stakeholders, but also as you start getting a functional product built, working with marketing, depending on what your go-to-market plan is, working with marketing and getting that kind of stuff out. But I tried to focus this in as much as possible on like building the product. Yeah. Our user researcher went back to do user testing. And we were using a tool called Maze, which lets us do moderated and unmoderated run-throughs of our products, let people, see them, use them, experience them. She also managed a like small beta group that we could roll out to, and get feedback from. That's particularly useful. Those beta groups can be very hard to keep engaged throughout the whole process. You tend to have to, at least for us, we would have to rebuild that group again and again because it's sort of like it just disperses. But yes, that's fantastic stuff to add. Before you get too far into the process, you've assembled the team, you've figured out what it is that you're building. I want you to, I think the next step is planning for the future a little bit. The reason that I think this is so important is you tend to get focused in on what you're building. You've defined out the experience, you've set the scope for the project. I mean, maybe you even thought far enough ahead to set like a V1 and a phase 2, but the question is how long do you want this product to actually be out there and succeeding and continuing to grow and be used? Likely much past launch, much past phase 2. And you need to put some thought to that early on. Some of that is because you want to make sure that you're not accidentally building yourself into a corner for not being able to scale, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest reason is sort of the issue of like, who moved my cheese? Like planning for having space for things that are coming in the future so that you don't have to move stuff around that customers have gotten used to already. And so if you're thinking that 3 years down the line, you're going to have some additional functionality, making sure that there's at least conceptually a space for it that will not cause you to adversely affect things that people are already used to. That's really important. That's really important for keeping users for the long haul. I'm going to ask it, even though I have my expectations. Who has been really used to some product service thing you use, and then they went and changed it, and it doesn't even matter if it was better, you liked it less? Yeah, this is where we start putting some time into thinking about how we're going to avoid making our users feel that way. That's what I mean about planning for the future. You don't need to lay it all out, but you need to be considering your users and in this space. And we've clearly all felt that. We need to be putting ourselves in our users' shoes and going, how can I make sure that I'm not making them feel that way? And now we're finally to some opinions on amazing designs. This was a point of contention in my most recent project that we built out, because my first UI designer was very creative. And I love creativity, but also sometimes there's just like a simple, standard, intuitive way to do it. And that's the way that I think it needs to be done. So I guess, look, I'm not going to say anything about like graphics, colors, that I would be wrong because I have no idea. But when it comes to how usable a design is, if you see everyone doing it one way, that is the way that people are going to expect it to be done. And that can feel really boring sometimes when you're putting something together. You could do something so much cooler, right? But when you then put it back into user testing and you ask someone to perform a task and they immediately go to this standard thing and it's not there, they're frustrated. And this can be as simple as, you've got a table displaying a bunch of, websites, and you tell them, filter that or search for a site. Where are they going to go? To the top of that table, looking for a search and filter, because that's where it always is. And if you put it anywhere else, or you make any fancy way of doing it, they're not going to know. And that's okay. There are places where you want to differentiate. Sure. Common practices are not one of them. And so to me, this is another one of those places that you have to rein yourself in a lot if you want to build a truly amazing product. So the first question that we asked was like, how do we get there? How do we get to successful product? And we did talk at least a little bit about planning for the future, but post-launch, let's say things go well and your product is filling that niche, paying customers, making people smile and be happy. How do we stay there? Because this, at least in my space, products that I build, they essentially have no end. They are always in development and creation. We are always adding to them. And I think the biggest thing for this is figuring out how to bring out the next features, like how you find the balance in all of your features as you continue to roll things out. So Simple example here. I talked about working with marketing and figuring out how we could, push a thing to market. They only care about wow, exciting features, things that they can absolutely just put ads about, brag about, screenshots, all this cool stuff in their marketing. That's great. But there are also must-have things, boring things, whether that's, things have started to get a little less performant and you need to clean that up, or whether that is, like in a control panel, for example, the thing that I was just talking about, in a WordPress control panel, activating and deactivating plugins, that's boring. Everyone does that. But also, you need it, or your control panel is not very useful to your customers. But it's not something marketing is going to go brag about. They're not going to be like, hey, we can do what everyone else does, right? So this path forward through future features for like riding that wave of a successful product and continuing to build it, for me, at least in my space, has been almost solely about balancing these two things and planning them out. And we literally put every task, every feature that we have to do tagged as like wow, or, not wow. And then we intersperse those, specifically working with our marketing team to figure out when to roll those out and how we meld those together, and whether it's like 2 wows and then a must have, or 2 must haves and then a wow, right? But balancing this all out. And while for me, I have a marketing team that is pushing to get those wows, and my technical side is always pushing to get the must-haves, I think that this is just a general practice of constantly making sure that your product is great and does all the things that it needs to do, but also keeping your users excited, right? Keeping them going, ooh, I can't, like, a new release, that's exciting. Like, I can't wait to see what's in it. That brings me to the end of kind of the planned out slides. We definitely have some Q&A. I already saw a hand go up, but I think that we are supposed to try to wait for a mic running. Thank you.